The Supreme Court today unanimously sided with Donald Trump, allowing the former president to remain on the election ballot and reversing a Colorado ruling that disqualified him from returning to office because of his conduct around the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. And Vice President Kamala Harris has emerged as one of the leading voices for Palestinians in closed door meetings. She pressed for a pause in fighting in Gaza with the member of Israel's war cabinet, Benny Gantz. This happened this afternoon at the White House. And according to reports, the vice president emphasized to Gantz the urgency of securing a hostage deal and reducing the humanitarian crisis that has unfolded alongside Israel's war against Hamas. And even in a Republican Party under former President Donald Trump's leadership, a party that has often rewarded crude insults, baseless claims, and incendiary language, Mark Robinson stands out among candidates this year for the volume of his bigoted attacks and vicious diatribes. The lieutenant governor of North Carolina and the first Black person to hold that office, he is the heavy favorite to clinch the GOP nomination for governor in their primary election. And more news about Vice President Kamala Harris. She was among those marking the 59th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, the day Alabama law officers attacked civil rights demonstrators on the iconic Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. The demonstrators were beaten by officers as they tried to march across Alabama on March 7th, 1965, in support of voting rights. And Nikki Haley had a big day over the weekend. She won her first and only primary in the District of Columbia. She received about 63% of the vote compared to Trump's 33%. Now, this amounted to her securing 19 of the available delegates, and she became the first woman ever to win a Republican presidential primary. Donald Trump is still positioned to lock down the nomination later this month, but this is major for Nikki Haley. And more than 50 years after the oral contraceptive pill went on the market in the United States, the country's first over-the-counter birth control pill will be available in stores and online nationwide later this month. Abortion rights advocates are excited about this new development and hope that this will become a part of an ongoing effort to provide body autonomy for women. This is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. This is hour 2 of Areva Martin in real time, and this is the hour where we go deeper, where we dig behind those headlines, and we bring you those stories that people are talking about. And this is Women's History Month, but it's also voting season. And this is the season where folks are having to make decisions about every election, from the national election, their Senate races, U.S. congressional races, and in lots of places, people are voting on mayors and judges and school board members and other state and local officials. And nothing could be more important than exercising your right to vote, the right to vote that those folks who were marching on Bloody Sunday were marching so that those of us today would have that right to vote. And we know around the country, there are states who have enacted laws to suppress our votes. Despite winning the right to vote decades ago, there are many state legislators who are still trying to make it more difficult for people of color in particular to vote, which is why we have to fight back, and we have to be so steadfast and diligent about exercising our voting rights and using our vote as our voice. And some folks say this year, particularly at the presidential level, that our democracy is on the line, and that a vote in favor of Republicans for the Senate, the House, and particularly the White House could mean the end of this democracy as we know it. And folks are saying, no, we're not being overly dramatic. This isn't just hyperbole, that really something is different because white supremacy and those who support white supremacy have been emboldened, and they are making it very clear that they want to take back the Senate, the House, and the White House. And the question is, how are Black voters, the most reliable base for Democrats for the last for decades, I should say, how are they going to vote? Lots of reports out, lots of news articles out suggesting that Black male voters in particular are attracted to Donald Trump as a candidate. Now, Donald Trump says he's winning over Black voters, male voters, because they've been indicted like him, and they like him because he's been indicted, and they find some kind of kinship with him. He also says that Black voters are attracted to him because he's selling these gaudy, grotesque gold tennis shoes, and that Black folks like tennis shoes. So, when folks are telling us how folks in our community are going to respond and vote, it's incumbent upon us to go to the source. So today, I have two of my favorite Black male voting experts and organizers joining us to talk about what they are hearing on the ground from Black male voters. So when we come forward, Mondale Robinson, founder of the Black Male Voter Project, and Cliff Albright, the co-founder of Black Voters Matter, are going to join us and tell us what's happening on the ground with Black male voters and really set the record straight on these, what I find to be highly offensive and racist comments from Donald Trump about what Black voters are attracted to in his candidacy. So make sure you stick around. KBLA Talk 1580. Don't touch that dial.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
Climate is king.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that caring for the community means caring about the climate. You might have heard that we announced a pretty bold 12-month, $2 million campaign to do 4 things. Increase climate literacy, turn up the volume on communities of color in the climate conversation, connect everyday people with the resources they need to survive and thrive, and highlight frontline climate justice crusaders of color throughout this year. KBLA Talk 1580 will be bringing you insightful interviews on all of our shows to help raise your climate IQ. Each quarter this year, we will also be hosting free climate events in various communities throughout the city with food, fun, and forward-thinking conversations. Thanks to partners like LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, the Sierra Club, the California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, AQMD, MWD, and more. You'll also be hearing more about a couple of national town halls broadcasting live from Los Angeles, to which you will be invited. And we'll be rolling out a robust social media campaign on all our platforms, as well as an outdoor media campaign, all designed to educate, enlighten, and empower you in our fight for climate justice.
We want cleaner air.
Caring about the community means caring about the climate. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that we really can change the world if we care enough.
Hello, my name is Rhonda Dixon. I'm running for Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge, Seat 39. I believe in the power of restorative justice, alternative sentencing, and equal access to justice. I was born and raised in South Los Angeles. Vote March 5th, 2024 for Rhonda Dixon, Seat 39. To find out more about me, go to www.rhondadixonforjudge.com. That's RONDADIXON, 4 judge.com. Paid for by Rhonda Dixon for Judge.
Hey, I have a secret.
Uh-huh.
I use Secret Whole Body Deodorant because more than just my armpits stink.
Oh, can I use it where my bra rubs under my...
Oh, yeah.
And what about down there? My...
Totally. 4 out of 5 gynecologists would recommend it. So I tried it, and now I get 72 hours of freshness from my pits to my...
Ooh, I love that it's a spray.
Me too. And it comes in sticks and creams too. Go get your Secret Whole Body Deodorant.
If you love to travel, Capital One has a rewards credit card that's perfect for you. With Venture X, earn unlimited double miles on everything you buy and turn everyday purchases into extraordinary trips. Plus, receive premium travel benefits like access to over 1,300 airport lounges where you just check in and chill out. Open up a world of possibilities with Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Lounge access is subject to change. See CapitalOne.com for details.
I'm back. And in a lot of states across the country, tomorrow is primary day. It's Super Tuesday, and lots of voters are going to go to the polls. And of course, they're going to be voting for the president. Folks will be voting for senators in some states and congressional folks, and a lot of local candidates are on the ballot. And there's been a lot of talk recently by both Democrats and Republicans about Black voters, particularly Black male voters. And we've been tracking what's happening on the ground with Black male voters across this country. And in this hour, we're going to continue that conversation. Mondale Robinson, the founder of the Black Male Voter Project, is here, and Cliff Albright, who is the co founder of Black Voters Matter. Good to see both of you. My friend Cliff, it's been a minute. Seems like I'm always talking to you when we're nervous, we're panicked, got to find out what's happening with Black voters. Are we going to pull it out? So always glad to be in conversation with you, and good to see you, my friend Mondale. Let's start with Donald Trump's comments that Black voters are going to vote for him because he's been indicted, he has a mugshot, and we can relate to that. And then we like tennis shoes. How did that, resonate? I'll start with you, Mondale. How did those comments resonate with you? And then how are you finding them resonating with Black male voters?
I don't have time for Donald Trump and his ridiculousness. I mean, Donald Trump did not just become the racist man that we know right now. Donald Trump has been this man since 1973 when the world met him as a racist. He became known in New York beyond real estate or following his daddy's shadow for discriminating against Black people trying to rent houses. And nothing has changed. We saw the same thing in the 80s when he was doing what he was doing when he spent $80-some thousand on an ad against the Central Park Five. This Donald Trump is not a new Donald Trump. I don't spend a lot of time on thinking about Donald Trump because he is, to me, the same as majority of white Americans. And people say that's a bold assertion when you say majority of white Americans. I would be remiss and also ahistorical if I didn't say white Americans, either by being passive when white people are discriminatory against Black men or Black people in general, or direct actions. So I don't really care about Donald Trump. I'm busy making sure that Black men who don't see themselves in the electoral process do not sit out this election. And that requires me to tone out that type of noise and ridiculousness. Donald Trump knows nothing about being Black. The idea that he think he's been discriminated against. And also we should know, while he was invited to South Carolina to speak at that convention by some called Black Conservative Federation, if you look at the pictures from that room was filled with white people, just like all of his rallies. So he was speaking to his racist rule base, as he always is, regardless of who the invitation came from.
No, you're right. And, he kind of did what he likes to do. He kind of peers out and says, the Blacks, I see the Blacks. He has this whole playbook that he uses. Cliff, though, what we're hearing, though, from, some Black folks that say they are supporting him, there's always a pastor, right? So there's this pastor in Ohio who's going to be spending all of his resources getting him elected. And we've heard some other, folks who have some pretty big platforms say things like, people like Black men like Donald Trump because he's real, he's transparent, and, he just tells it like it is. And they feel like Biden, doesn't, I guess what they're saying, he has this kind of male bravado, this hubris that they don't find that Joe Biden has. Do you think that is resonating with some portion of the Black male voters? And is it any more than what we've seen in the past?
Hey, Areva, it's good to see you. Yeah, I mean, I think that the last part of your question is the key part, right? You always have some number of Black folks, male or female, right? But for now, let's talk Black males. You've always had some Black folks who voted for Trump in 2016, voted for Bush in previous years. I'm old enough to remember, Bush and his faith-based initiative where he was trying to get a whole bunch of Black churches to vote conservative and vote Republican. And so you've always had some number of Black folks that were willing to do that, just as, I'm reminded that you often would even have some Black folks on a slave plantation that would turn in the people planning the slave rebellion, right? So we've always had some number of those folks, right? And that number is not increasing significantly, in spite of all the talk, in spite of whatever random polls that they do showing 22% of this and that, and that's not happening, right? It didn't happen in 16. They said that it would happen in 20. It didn't happen then. It didn't happen when they scraped up Herschel Walker to run in Georgia, because they figured surely Black men will vote for another Black dude that used to run around with the football and was a hero and Heisman Trophy and all that. And he didn't get 20% of Black men. It's not happening because Black men and women are smart enough to look past, a black football player or a rich guy, the braggadocio, all this stuff that you were mentioning, right? We're smart enough to look past all that and look past like a couple of rappers that might be talking fondly about Donald Trump. We're smart enough to look past that because at the end of the day, all the things that Mondale pointed out, right? His racist past, his racist presidency, an entire party really, which has really ceased to become a party, is really just the country's largest hate group running on policies that go against the interests of black folks. That's what it is that determines how black folks, male and female, are going to vote. Who is talking about our issues? Who's talking about our health care? Who's talking about economic justice? Who's talking about reparations? Who's talking about police reform? And all those issues, whether it's Trump or more broadly the people in his crew, they're all pushing policies that are literally based on white supremacy and anti-blackness, from ending affirmative action, attacking DEI, attacking Black history, attacking voting rights. So no, some gold shoes are not going to make black men vote for Trump. A mugshot is not going to make black men vote for Trump.
Wow, you just gave me a whole lot of confidence because, sometimes you read these headlines and I think people start to parrot the headlines. They start to repeat the Republican talking points and people start to believe some of these headlines. And we know that if you pick up a New York Times, Washington Post, there are 20 articles a day on Donald Trump. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the work that they're doing barely gets any air, any media time in what we'll call corporate mainstream media, which I was surprised to even see articles about Kamala Harris on the Edmund Pettus Bridge this weekend, and then having that really important meeting in the White House around Israel and Hamas. So, okay, Mondale and Cliff, we're not going to see this massive surge of black male voters for Donald Trump. What about the belief by some pundits and experts that black male voters are going to sit it out, that they are disgruntled with the Biden-Harris administration, that they don't feel like the promises made have been kept, and that they don't see themselves in this Democratic Party? So, yeah, I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump. I see he's a racist and an idiot, but maybe I don't vote for anyone. Are you seeing that, Mondale, in the work that you're doing on the ground?
I think it's short-sighted of us to just talk about like black men being disgruntled with this current administration. Black men were disgruntled with every administration. I mean, we make up the lowest rung of all social markers. Anything that tells you about quality of life, if you look at demographics, black men are at the bottom of it. We have the shortest lives, we're over-policed, we're over-sentenced. Even when we're little boys, we are more likely to be suspended or expelled, more likely to be represented in special need classes. There's no point in black men's lives where America does not fail us. And all of the issues that they fail us on are political issues. So the disgruntledness, we shouldn't even call it disgruntled, we should call it antipathy, because we shouldn't downplay black men's fire. And rightfully so, it's ahistorical to think that since the 15th Amendment, when black men were so-called gave the right to vote, we've been the guinea pigs, the first and sustained guinea pigs of voter suppression. And people forget that, we are not seeing substantial gains as it pertains to the black men who make up the majority of those who don't see themselves in politics and don't vote. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the number of black men registered to vote in this country, it's 9.6 million. Of that 9.6 million, over 60% have either voted in one or none of the last 4 federal elections. That's a critique, not of black men, but of the lack of investment in issues that are important to them. The reason that people are bragging about how great the economy is, but for black men in the past 2 months, we've seen unemployment rate rise. And that's only the black men that are participating in politics. I mean, or in the job market. What about those who just completely dropped out because of microaggressions, because they don't see themselves ever being placed in there? So I think what happens is people come at black men in a way that is kind of tacky. And it's ahistorical. So yeah, I think black men, it is a chance that black men will sit out elections. The problem though is we count black men as the base, when in actuality, black men are persuasion voters. Not persuasion to not to vote for Donald Trump, but persuasion to participate. And that's the work of talking to people who don't have their basic needs met. Black men find themselves at the bottom of all social wrongs. We're not safe in housing. We're not safe in security. We're not safe from policing. We're not safe in any manner. So to act and talk about us, about the vote as if it's the most important thing, and the vote is not really address anything that's plaguing black men, seems a little ahistorical to this demographic. Here's what I would say though. It is not beyond belief that we can reach this demographic and also have them animated about voting. The problem is we keep talking about these anecdotal polls that don't really talk to this demographic. We're talking to brothers about college education and the college debt, which is fine. Unfortunately, there are more Black men that did not go to college that are sit on elections. There are more Black men that belong to gangs in this country than Divine Nine fraternities. So when we only showing brothers that look like Barack Obama, Cliff, and myself, and we're not talking to brothers who don't see themselves or there are issues being raised up, then we're doing a disservice to all of the work that should be poured into this demographic overwhelmingly. Meaning we need to invest early and not using party figures, Black men that grew up in the party, that came all the way through the party to run out and do the same thing the white consultants are doing and say the same thing the white consultants are saying. It's not going to work.
So let me ask you this, Cliff, based on what Mondale is saying, is there any group, yours included, that are talking to those Black voters, not the divine, get that word out, the Divine Nine college graduate, two graduate degree kind of Black men, but those men who are more likely to be disconnected from politics altogether, who maybe they're not tracking this on cable news, they're not even tracking it on their social media. I've been having this conversation with people about how few people are even tracking the election, even though we are in primary season. So who is speaking to those voters that Mondale just talked about?
Yeah, I mean, you've got some great groups, some national, some state, some local, that are doing some really good work and having conversations with folks every day. You got groups like Mondale's. You got groups like, my brother John Taylor here in Georgia, who does some really good work with his Black Male Initiative. You got groups like that Black Men Build. You got groups that have these conversations and not just are having these conversations around elections, right? Groups like Mondale's, groups like ours, groups like some of the ones I named, they're having conversations all throughout the year. They're talking about, brothers like Mauli Davis here in Atlanta, holding a Black Man Lab every Monday. Like, there are groups that are having these conversations every day, every week, every month about a range of issues. The issues that Mondale was talking about, right? Issues of economics, and not even just economics from the point of, do I have a job, but how do I create a business? How do I start a business and get it supported? Conversations around gun violence, right? Folks in our community, especially brothers in our community, we care about gun violence. I was in a crew where, every day I would hear growing up the stats about whether or not you're likely to make it to age 21, right? And today's young Black men are hearing the same stats, largely because of gun violence, right? So all of these are issues that brothers want to talk about, but a lot of times people aren't trying to have that conversation because there is an assumption that we don't want to have that conversation, right? I've been in situations doing outreach with folks where, some people will look and they'll see a group of brothers hanging out on a corner or hanging out. I was in Texas once and there were some brothers hanging out by a car shop, right? And some people, they were like, they didn't really prioritize talking to them, right? I made a beeline for them because that's who I wanted to talk to. And when I got in a conversation with them, and I got in a long conversation with a couple of them. And at the end of it, I'll never forget, the brother said, you know what? I've been wanting to talk about this stuff, but, I just ain't really had the space or had the people around me that wanted to have that conversation, right? And so there are brothers out there dying to have, that's probably a bad word to choose, but, anxious to have these conversations, but they don't get a door knock. Think about the way that candidates and parties do their outreach. Oftentimes they just want to focus on what they call a super voter, right? The ones that have voted consistently in the past elections, right? So when you got the stats that Mondale was just talking about, right? That, you got brothers that haven't voted consistently, then guess what? They don't get the knock at the door. They don't get the phone call. They don't get the text message unless it's from somebody that's got intentionality around saying, that is exactly who we want to talk to. And I promise you, when we have these conversations, brothers respond. When we have conversations around the issues that brothers care about, we respond. Let's keep in mind, hold
that thought for me, Cliff. We've got to take a break, but I do want to come back to that conversation about what will motivate those voters, and also talk about down ballot races, because it's also not to just talk about the president, but to talk about all of these races. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
The right time. More of Areva Martin in real time when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton. Here's the latest on the Black Information Network. D.C. leaders are answering community questions ahead of a critical vote on the Secure D.C. crime bill. Mayor Muriel Bowser, Police Chief Pamela Smith, and other city government staffers met with advisory neighborhood commission members recently. Much of the focus was on crime, with the mayor, who is Black, saying that criminal activity during the first 2 months of 2024 is down significantly from the same period last year. Many of the ANC commissioners said they supported the Secure D.C. bill, but wanted to see more done to address juvenile crime and retail theft. Weekly recycling is set to resume today in the city of Baltimore. Mayor Brandon Scott, who is Black, held an event to explain the resumption of recycling activities after it was suspended at the beginning of the pandemic 4 years ago. It returned on a bi-weekly basis, and last July, the Department of Public Works added more trucks and hired more crew members. That's the latest. I'm Amber Payton on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network.
Over in Culver City, watch for a traffic jam that remains over 45 minutes on the 405 North between National Boulevard and Nordoff Street. West LA's 405 South between Santa Monica Boulevard and La Tierra still runs heavy up to 35 minutes. We're getting reports of a pothole in the right lane of Lincoln Heights 5 North before Main Street. Please drive carefully and watch for heavy traffic from the 10. Also, there's a 30-minute traffic jam back in Hollywood's 101 South between Western Avenue, Santa Monica Boulevard Split, and Mission Road.
Did you know Discover wants everyone to feel special? That's why with your Discover card, you have access to 24/7 customer service, as well as $0 fraud liability, which means you're never held responsible for unauthorized purchases. Learn more at discover.com/credit card. Limitations apply.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Clippers have no timetable for when Russell Westbrook might be able to return to the lineup. Westbrook was diagnosed with a fractured left hand. He was injured in Friday's game against Washington. The 16-year veteran had played in all 58 games this season leading up to Friday night. Westbrook has been a major factor in the Clippers' success. Off the bench, he was averaging 11.1 points, 5.2 rebounds, and 4.5 assists. Top 5 women's college basketball teams in this week's AP poll: undefeated South Carolina, Stanford, Iowa, Ohio State, and USC. UCLA is 7th. USC will be the number 2 seed in the women's Pac-12 tournament in Vegas. The 3rd seed goes to UCLA. The tournament starts Thursday. Former USC quarterback Caleb Williams has not changed his mind about hiring an agent. Williams said he will enter the NFL draft without an agent. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
All I need is one mic.
With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley. Recently, the Washington Post ran a major story which in sum reveals that racial discrimination in jury selection persists in America. Most often, the practice occurs through a legal tactic called peremptory challenge, which allows an attorney to strike a potential juror without having to state a reason. In the 1986 Batson Doctrine, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the use of peremptory challenges to exclude potential jurors solely based on their race violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. By the way, the late great Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall despised peremptory challenges. New data in the Washington Post story underscores that nearly 40 years after the Batson decision, the problem remains widespread. One study in the Deep South found that Black jurors are being challenged and dismissed at double and triple the rates of other prospective jurors. Bottom line, it's racist, it's wrong, and it's pervasive, even as research shows that racially diverse juries spend more time deliberating, make fewer errors, and can result in fairer trials. One of the arguments in the Ninth Circuit appeal, brought by former LA City Councilman Mark Ridley Thomas, is about violation of that Batson Doctrine. In its case against MRT, the U.S. Attorney's Office struck Black women from the jury pool based on demeanor and employment status, a clear violation of the law. A long list of high-profile Black law professors, historians, and justice centers have now filed amicus briefs in support of MRT's position. But the irony of a Black elected official who for more than 3 decades represented the best interests of his Black constituents, having Black women voters struck from his jury pool is repugnant and morally wrong. So much for being judged by a jury of your peers. MRT's legal team argues correctly in its filing that given well-established law and legal principles set forth by the Supreme Court, Ninth Circuit, and state courts and legislatures, the Ninth Circuit should likewise reaffirm and clearly state that applying facially neutral justifications in discriminatory ways to target Black women and other protected groups presumptively violates Batson. I couldn't agree more. For KBLA Talk 1580, I'm Tavis Smiley. We welcome your comments.
Politics has become so messy lately, it's hard to find a reason to be hopeful. Hi, my name is Shakira. I'd like to tell you why Adam Schiff gives me hope. My parents raised me to take my right to vote seriously, so I try to stay on top of what's going on. I saw Adam Schiff lead the impeachment and insurrection hearings. He seemed like someone I could believe in. Then I actually met him at the MLK parade in South Central LA this year. Adam listened. He cared. I got to see who he is. He understands the struggle we have with the cost of living, all the parents working extra shifts and taking second jobs to get by. He gets a threat to our democracy and our freedoms. Adam Schiff knows how tough things really are for a lot of us, and I believe he's going to do something about it. It gives me hope, but hope isn't enough. We need to vote for Adam Schiff for Senate.
I'm Adam Schiff, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Schiff for Senate.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, home of the 2024 Climate Justice Campaign.
Hey, Californians, are you ready to make your home ownership dreams come true? The California Dream for All Shared Appreciation Loan Program might be for you. First-generation homebuyers can get down payment and closing cost assistance along with a first mortgage to help you unlock the door of your new home. Applications open in April, so talk to an approved lender to see if you're eligible. Find out more at calhfa.ca.gov/dream or call 877-922-5432. A message from the California Housing Fund.
We are back, and Mondale Robinson and Cliff Albright are joining me. We're talking about Black voters, particularly Black male voters. Lots of polls out there, lots of reports, lots of folks opining about Black male voters and how they are likely to vote in this year's election, particularly the presidential election. And Mondale and Cliff are setting the record straight, and with some news that's, I think, we all should hear, because something that happens in this country called groupthink. We read it, we hear it, we read it, and we hear it. And then people start to repeat things as if they are factual. And in many cases, they are the opposite of factual. And Cliff and Mondale have made it clear that based on the work they are doing, there's not going to be some surge in Black male voters who are going to be voting Republican or voting for Donald Trump, despite his repeated claims to the contrary. Cliff, let's go back talking about what's going to motivate those, what people oftentimes refer to as low propensity voters, those voters who aren't voting in every election, who you said campaigns don't spend a lot of money focused on it. They're focused on those regular voters. Do you see something different happening in this year's Democratic campaign? Do you see the campaign putting money and resources into some of those voters you talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's coming. I know that there have been some discussions. You know, I've even been in meetings with the vice president's office around, you know, how to do outreach to Black men, and that there's a lot of Black men that they're reaching out to get some advice on that. So I believe that it's coming. You know, it hasn't really developed fully yet, but guess what? We're in like the first week of March. So, you know, the campaigning hasn't really started in full, but to the point that we made earlier, that's part of the shift that we're trying to see take place, that they don't wait until September and October and then try to kick it in full gear, or wait until August after the party conventions take place. Trying to encourage folks to have these discussions earlier in the year and to be willing to drill down and talk about the issues that that our communities care about in general, and again, that Black voters care about, Black male voters care about in particular, you know. And there are some slight differences in, like, not the issues, but the different weight or the different priority that, you know, brothers and sisters put on certain issues. We all care about jobs. We all care about our health. But if you break it down, you'll see that Black women which we all know, right? Black women will be more focused on health and healthcare issues than Black men will. We all care about jobs and economic development, right? But for a variety of reasons, including the history of patriarchy and gender roles, you'll tend to see Black men tend to have a little bit more of a focus on those issues. That's part of the reason why, again, when you hear some of these rappers or whatever that are talking about Trump, it's usually with that lens on that, what's he going to do? Who's going to do what for jobs and economic development and an economic plan and all that stuff. So that we all care about the same issues, but the weight that we tend to put on them are a little bit different. And part of how you have to learn to communicate in our community is to recognize that. We say it all the time. We're not a monolith. Yes, we have a lot of the issues and concerns at mind, but like the way that you communicate, the language that you use, where you deliver those messages, both where geographically as well as where, like in terms of cyberspace, like what streaming channels you focus on, or gaming, or like, just what outlets that you look at, all of that is a part of how a message has to be delivered and how frequently you deliver that message, right? It can't just be once or twice. You've got to repeatedly invest. You've got to use Black media, like Brother Roland Martin is talking about all the time, right? Areva show, right? You got to use Black media in order to get these messages across. So I don't think either one of us is saying that things can't be done better, right? That there aren't improvements in the way that candidates and parties and organizations need to communicate with Black men. That is definitely true. It's got to be done better. But this narrative and notion that of Black men just, shifting in waves to Trump or anything like that is not happening. The last thing I'm gonna say is keeping in mind, Black men are routinely the second most consistent progressive vote in this country, behind only Black women, right? And so this notion, if we really want to have a discussion about a certain electorate, folks really probably need to be saying what's going on with white voters, or what's going on with white women who, even after Trump's first term, still gave him the majority of their vote. It ain't Black men that's doing that, right? And so there's some demographics that need to have a discussion, but this focus, this over focus or over concern, we don't mind being focused on Black men. That's cool. But this negative focus, this negative attention, this negative narrative is way out of control.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because oftentimes in the party, there is this focus on suburban white women. And we spend a lot of time trying to win over those suburban white women. And obviously the Democratic Party is a coalition party, Mondale. But do you think in this year's 2024 election, that's happening again, where the party is disproportionately spending time on those white suburban voters in a way that could be counterproductive?
Yeah, a couple of things. First, let me start by saying that the party, the country itself, in media especially, always prioritize white rural voters over everybody else. They were talking about a minority of the population. White rural voters make up about 20%. And these are the most racist of America. This is not me just speculating. There's studies after studies that show that white rural voters are more likely to be anti-democratic, meaning they would be willing to tear down our institutions to keep Trump forever. They're more likely to be xenophobic, anti-LGBTQI people, anti-immigrant. So we know this for a fact, yet and still you always hear the media say to Democrats or progressives, hey, what are you going to do to win back the rural voter, and never say to Republicans, what are you going to do to win the urban voters? So we've always seen this outsizing of vote. But here's what I would say. Black Male Voter Project, my organization, is not a tool of the Democratic Party or any party for that matter. Our job is to be trusted messenger for Black men who don't see themselves in the political process, so as to change the outcomes that they're living with on a daily basis. And in saying and doing that, we recognize a couple things. The first thing is there are no such thing as low propensity Black men, right? If we call people super voters, and the way that the party takes credit for the super voters, then they also should take credit for the low investment voters, knowing that every election cycle, we see that the more money you spend on voters, the more likely they are to participate. And by spending on voters, we're not talking about running $1 million or $2 million of ads in one market. We're talking about truly investment. The campaign raised $42 million last year, Biden's campaign, and 117 million or so, 97 million in the last 3 months of last year. The best investment they can do is dump a ton of that cash into organizations that are grassroots organizations that are already trusted messengers. Because what they're not going to be able to do is convince Black men to love them or like them or anybody for that matter with a D beside their name, because Black men don't trust institutions in general. This is not to say that Black men can't be animated and motivated to go vote. It is to say, though, it will not be because of any candidate, regardless of who they are, because we don't have enough time to address the 152 years of epigenetic trauma that's associated with being Black and man in this country. And we should also say that there's this argument that always want to make Black men less progressive than anybody. But when we see and we own, Black Male Voter Project does more information on Black men than any other organ in this country. And what we found out was we are more progressive than people give us credit. We're just not engaged on the same level. A great example of this, after Stacey Abrams lost in 2018, the world was ready to set Black men on fire for costing 12% that voted against Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams was running for governor of a state called Georgia, for everybody that's been under the rock for the past 4 or 5 years, right? But there was a state right beneath Stacey Abrams that had a Black progressive running too. His name was Andrew Gillum. And guess what happened in that state? 13% of Black women voted against Andrew Gillum. That story didn't make anybody's headline. So it's also about what we're saying about Black people. We've also, I was telling people in 2022, Black men support women's right to choose more than anybody, including more than Black women. People said I was crazy. I had 3 heads. There's no way that's true. And then I showed them, we went to Ohio and we just saw Black men outperform everybody. The closest demographic to us on issue 1 on the Ohio ballot in 2023, we were at 88%, Black men were, and the closest demographics were Black women at 80%. And everybody else was way blown out of water. So this idea that Black men are toxic or bad for our movement is only saying to me and all of the Black men that don't see themselves in politics is, this is why I sit out elections. And the problem with that is we have Black faces in the party that are establishment creatures, but they're so close and worried about their comparability to proximity, to whiteness, that they're not willing to tell the truth about what's going to motivate our community.
Well, when we come forward, I do want to talk about who those influencers are. Who are the people? Because we hear a lot about, influencers and let's get Taylor Swift and, let's get these big high profile people. And I know men who probably have been at those meetings with you, Cliff, who've been at the VP's house in those small group male meetings talking about what's going to motivate and how do they get Black male voters involved. So I do want to talk to both of you about who do you think those messengers should be and who are they likely to be in this year's presidential election? Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
Do you support public education? More than 38,000 educators at United Teachers Los Angeles do too. Together, we have fought for a better public education for our students and communities, and having you on our side has been essential in our fight for better public schools. Together, we will continue to work for public schools with green spaces, more mental health staff, smaller class sizes at every grade level, and a higher investment in the Black Student Achievement Plan. We are UTLA, and you make us stronger.
With your Los Angeles Public Library card, you can access the latest music, movies, audiobooks, ebooks, graphic novels, and more, all for free. Check it out at lapl.org/emedia. That's lapl.org/emedia.
Politics has become so messy lately, it's hard to find a reason to be hopeful. Hi, my name is Shakira. I'd like to tell you why Adam Schiff gives me hope. My parents raised me to take my right to vote seriously. So I try to stay on top of what's going on. I saw Adam Schiff lead the impeachment and insurrection hearings. He seemed like someone I could believe in. Then I actually met him at the MLK parade in South Central LA this year. Adam listened. He cared. I got to see who he is. He understands the struggle we have with the cost of living, all the parents working extra shifts and taking second jobs to get by. He gets a threat to our democracy and our freedoms. Adam Schiff knows how tough things really are for a lot of us, and I believe he's going to do something about it. It gives me hope, but hope isn't enough. We need to vote for Adam Schiff for Senate.
I'm Adam Schiff, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Schiff for Senate.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment. LA's 99 neighborhood councils form the grassroots level of the Los Angeles city government. The system was created to connect LA's diverse communities to City Hall. While neighborhood council board members are volunteers, they are also public officials elected to office by the members of their community. Neighborhood councils advocate on issues like homelessness, housing, land use, emergency preparedness, public safety, parks, transportation, and sustainability. They also provide local expertise on the delivery of city services to their various communities. Neighborhood councils are open to participation by anyone who is a part of the fabric of daily life in said community. This includes those who live, work, or own property or a business. If you are interested in stepping up to join your local neighborhood council, visit www.empowerla.org. That's empowerla.org. It's time to think globally, but act locally. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
All right, Cliff, we know oftentimes when you do these interviews, and I've done my share of them over the last couple of months, we always get asked this question about, a high profile person has made a comment anti-Joe Biden, anti-Democrats. He's too old. Nobody's excited about him, blah, blah, blah. Tell us, who are those influencers, if there are any, that you think the majority of Black male voters are likely to take their cues from? Who are they asking the questions, like the guys you said on the street corner in Texas? If they don't have you around, if you weren't there to go talk to them, who are they talking to and who are they listening to?
I mean, I think there's a range of influencers, right? For better or worse, right? There's some that are more informed than others, right? There are some that I disagree with, but I actually believe that they mean well. They just have bad information, which we need to also touch on, which is the disinformation that gets targeted to our community. And then there's some folks that, I disagree with. And I don't think it's just a matter of like they just have bad information. In some cases, it's because they're actually serving an agenda, right? And so and they have some complicated relationships with folks that are anti-Black, and they try to cover up the anti-Blackness by using a Black influencer. So there's different folks that have different motivations and different levels of information. There's one popular radio show host who's been getting a lot of attention because of his comments about Joe Biden, but he also makes comments about Trump, and so it really depends. There's a bunch of folks that I think that they should be listening to. There's folks that are in media that whether it's folks like you or Joy Reid or some of the other commentators on some of the networks that I think do a great job, right? And that they are influencers as well. There are actually actors and actresses and sports figures that I think do a great job. Heck, Senator Warnock would not be a senator right now, arguably, if not for the sisters in the WNBA, particular, with the Atlanta Dream, right, that came out wearing his shirts when he first ran for office. So, I think that there's space here for a lot of different people. All I ever ask and all I encourage and try to offer to folks that are influencers is that we use accurate information. And unfortunately, sometimes that you got folks that are just using bad information, again, either intentionally, but a lot of times it's just unintentional. And that's because they, just like a lot of folks in our community, are targeted with disinformation, right? There was an article that came out today that I'm quoted in that is talking about AI, right? Artificial intelligence and these deep fakes, fake photos, fake videos, fake robocalls, right? There's a couple of photos of Trump going around, including one where he's sitting with six brothers supposedly on a stoop where his motorcade was supposed to be going through their community. He just gets out and sits on the stoop. It's a fake photo. But by the time people figure out that it's a fake photo, it's already gotten 1 million views, 2 million views, and then mess around and one of our influencers get it. Again, not knowing that it's a fake, but now they're adding to the disinformation. And so and that's not accidental. There's a targeted strategy. It happened in 2016. with foreign influence. It happened in 20. This is not conspiracy theory. This is documented, and it's happening right now. And a lot of it is targeted at our younger Black voters. It's targeted at young Black men, and it can be very disastrous when people start thinking that stuff that is actually fake and false, but they start thinking that it's reality.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Mondale. What is your organization doing to combat that? Cliff is right. It's well documented. It's not just happening by U.S. actors. We have Russia and China and other foreign actors who have an agenda, who are targeting a particular set of voters, and a lot of them happen to be Black voters. So how, somebody who sees that photo, there's a law passed in California that lowered the threshold for making theft a felony versus a misdemeanor. They lowered the threshold from $950 to $400. And a comedian tweeted that California no longer criminalized theft up to $950. Now, that's not what this law did. It changed the theft threshold from a felony to a misdemeanor. But as Cliff said, it went all around the world, and people started blaming Black mayor in San Francisco, London Breed, for having changed the laws and now just opened the floodgates and opened the doors for all folks to go and steal at Nordstrom's, Macy's, etc. And it was just plain out wrong. But she has paid a price for folks who now believe that she has not done anything to, protect the businesses, the big businesses, the small businesses from this kind of theft. So this stuff is real, and it has real consequences.
Yeah, it does. But I mean, not with the demographic I'm concerned with. Let me be clear. My brother Cliff is an ambassador when it comes to worried about or making sure that people's feelings aren't hurt. Charlemagne the God is not a voice that people should be taking serious. The Black men that I'm engaging with think that guy's a joke because he plays with issues that are too important to our community. So we need to say that. And I think I start right there. When we're talking about influencers as it pertains to this demographic, there are not a lot of influencers that can move these Black men. If famous people would have worked in 2016 when Hillary Clinton had when Hillary Clinton had Jay-Z and Beyonce do a concert in Philadelphia, Black people wouldn't have not stayed home, Black men specifically, after the concert. Yeah, they enjoyed the concert, but that's not how they take their information. Black men don't see anybody as their leaders. When we poll them brothers, over 70% of them think that they're the most important person in their community as it pertains to their decision on to do something or not to do anything. Secondly, we still have people using tactics that were created in the 60s for a Black man from the 60s. We are in 2024. 80% of Black men don't go to church. 80% of Black men don't go to church. So I don't care when Donald Trump is sitting with Black preachers. And Black preachers know that he's milking, that whoever the Black preacher sitting with Trump, know that he's milking Trump because he's disconnected from our community. Because he know his congregation is filled with sisters of all ages, but it ain't a lot of brothers in there. Those are not the people that are motivating Black men. Black men tell us that they get their information that they trust and believe from trusted messengers, from people extremely close to them, which means politics for Black men are extremely local, like in their circle, local. And also from outsources or outlets that people ain't even thinking about. So why I'm concerned with AI, as Cliff was talking about, why I'm concerned with voter suppression tactics, why I'm concerned with misinformation. I'm more concerned with the lack of investment in Black men because it does more harm. We talk about all of these voter suppression tactics, and no one ever talks about the number one voter suppression tactic for Black men, and it's poverty. It's poverty. So if we're not really talking about issues or addressing Black men, and Black men don't see the vote as a tool to address what's plaguing them, it don't matter what they're being told. Black men don't fall for dumbness. And Cliff said it earlier, we are not a monolith, but we vote monolithically. Regardless of what demographic Black people find themselves in financially, we vote like a block. We're the only demographic in the country that shows up in that manner. Nobody does that. Nobody. We spend a lot of time talking about the 8 to 12% of Black people that don't follow the rule that the most of us do, which also tells us that the world still believes that Black folk should not have the right to think for themselves, because that's what the conversation should be about. We're talking about 8 to 12% of Black people that might not vote for progressive or for our communities, and they vote for themselves. So I think that's a problem for me. It also says that Black people can't be conservative, maybe. And I think we need to address that. Furthermore, I go a step further. Nobody is an expert on Black men in this country. The Black men that don't see themselves in politics are an untapped untapped, unresearched source. Every tactic that we're using has a down or a pull on the voters as it pertains to black men because it's transactional. And we are not saying that in a way that's honest. And I think that problem freaks me out when I see so many money, billions of dollars being spent on the same consultants cycle after cycle to say the same thing about the failed tactics. If the Democratic Party or any progressive auxiliary looked at itself as a business, they would clearly say that their consultants are failing them when this large percentage of their base don't participate in their elections.
We've got to leave it there. I know, Cliff, you wanted to get in. I got to have you back. We are out of time. No, thank you so much, Cliff. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Thank you, Mondale. Bright and really on point analysis tonight on black male voters. Make sure you stick around. Robin Ayers and the Raw Report coming up on KBLA Talk 1580.